At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Edit audio.
Our bodies were made for pleasure, literally. Like, we have an organ on our body that has no use except for pleasure.
But
that's it.
Right.
That's all it's made for. And then I'm like, well, why would the creator give me this thing?
Right.
And then also consign me to a world of misery? That doesn't make any sense to me.
What if bliss isn't indulgent but necessary? Hello, and welcome back to the Be Well Sis podcast. I am your host, Dr. Cassandra Dunbar. How has life been treating you? But more importantly, how have you been treating yourself? Me, I'm on this spinning rock, doing my very best, and I hope you're really, really doing good and you're treating yourself well because you deserve it. This is a conversation that I needed to have and just did not realize it. So I'm so grateful. So it is featuring Hannah Eko. And she is the founder of The Lit Club and author of Honey is the Knife, Why Choosing Bliss is a Radical Act. In our conversation, we unpack why the strong Black woman archetype or strong Black woman trope often leads to things like spiritual guilt, burnout, and collective codependency. So this is such a good conversation. It really is not about escapism when we talk about bliss and pleasure. It's about refusing and opting out of an identity of exhaustion and self-sacrifice, especially as Black women. So as always, thank you so much for joining. I am so glad you're here. Be well, sis. I would love to talk about Honey is the Knife. So what is that about? Like, if you were to just use one phrase to describe that collection, what would you say it would be, that one phrase?
So the subtitle of the book is like, it's Honey is a Knife, or How I Learned to Stop Fixing Myself and Love My Bliss. So that really is the theory moving into practice. So basically it's like, it's a common refrain in like almost all spirituality and self-healing, right? That whatever broke us, wounded us is also our path towards healing, so it's not about running away from these things. It's almost seeing them as initiation points. It's sad that so many of us, especially as Black women, have these really deep, sad, like wounding spaces of initiation. But even those are like, oh, what's on the other side of this? What is this leading me to remember about myself and my worth? So for Honey is a Knife, it's like for Oshun, who's like a West African feminine deity who's associated with sweetness and fresh water and creativity. It's not, it has nothing to do with like having to worship her or become an Anifa initiate. It's for me the inspiration that so many of her stories are about her taking a wound, some kind of abuse, some kind of neglect, and turning it into her power. So, people often pigeonholed her, even in the stories from like hundreds, thousands of years ago, as though she's just this promiscuous, floozy running around, right? And she was like, okay, I'll show you floozy, right? Like, I'm going to use that as my power. And she never fights. She has a warrior side to her, but really for her, she inspires me in her stories that anything that's leveled at me, it now just becomes part of my initiation to the sweetness on the other side. So every knife wound or the wounds that have come our way is also a space to remember who we really are, that that actually was a disruption. So that's really what that means to me, because there's like praise literature about her where it says, Oshun, I wish I could speak Yoruba better, but my accent is trash, so I'm not going to try it right now. With Oshun, you remember that like honey is the knife, meaning like she doesn't cut with bitterness or with rage. her sword is her sweetness. That's what she defends
Mm.
herself with, right? She knows that she is sweet, and she's going to keep her sweetness as her protection. So that's kind of
Mm.
what that moves with.
That's beautiful, because I was going to ask you, what does honey is the knife mean? But I get it
Mm,
now. You know, one of the things that I think a lot of us struggle with, especially as women, especially as people who are soft, right? Or who are sweet, we feel that that's used against us, right?
hmm hmm
Especially in a world that's very fast paced, that really, it looks like on the outside, like a hardness is what wins. How do you keep your softness, and how do you turn your softness in being your shield, your protector, or even your sword, right? Your knife.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. And to me, that's always the saddest thing I see, especially for so many of us Black women, is the way that our love has been turned against us.
Mm,
And I've seen that with a lot of, like, in my own lineage.
yeah.
I feel like for me, it's just constantly coming back as like a reminder,
Mhm.
like, who do I really want to be? Who does this hardness benefit? Because it's certainly
Mm,
not me, right?
yeah.
Like,
Yep.
it makes me cranky. It makes me harsh. And I can sometimes, I'm not going to lie, like, I have my moments as well.
Sure.
But I also feel that for my grander vision of who I am, I'm like, it isn't a person of harshness. It isn't a
Hmm.
person of bitterness, even though those things are in my sweetness story as well.
Hmm.
So I think it's like really coming back to you as source, and making sure also, like, you are protecting yourself, right? Like, sometimes certain environments are just, and it can be really difficult, but certain environments are just like not made for us to thrive,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Like, if I planted a certain like flower in another soil system, it
Yeah.
could just deflate, and there's nothing
Yep.
wrong with the flower. It's
Yep.
the fact of it's not getting the nutrients. And so I feel like for Black women, that we really are, like, all of us are divine and
Hmm.
sacred vessels, right? To me, I always look at it like the African diaspora. Like, we're so, even of our differences, we're so connected.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, many of the environments that we have found ourselves in, because of racism, because of
Yep.
colonialism, because of Jim Crow, because of all these things, like, they're not like kind spaces for us to
Yeah.
thrive. So having a lot of like love for ourselves, and knowing that you're going to, sadly, but I think that there's more opportunity now, find those spaces that help you to keep that softness, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And really invest in them. And sometimes it might even feel uncomfortable if you've been used to a certain level of harshness in your life.
Yes.
It won't feel immediately like, oh, this is where I belong, right? Because that's what growth is. Growth is uncomfortable. Because I used to
Hmm.
confuse it that something was wrong. But that's a big one, I think, is just like really, as much as you can, curating your environment, whatever you can control, and
Yes.
forgiving yourself for what you can't.
Yeah. Ooh, forgiving yourself for what you can't. Ooh,
Mhm.
that's so, so true. You describe yourself as being a punk spiritualist. So what does that mean?
And it's funny because, like, I think you're that was like the first time I actually put that down. But I was like, yeah, I kind of am. Like, I kind of am.
Let's talk
Like,
about it. I'm excited.
I was never like cool enough to be like a real punk. I kind of wanted to hang out with those kids. They were like, no,
Their
and to be,
loss.
yeah. And also, like, I like, fancy kind, like, good things. So I was like, I
Hmm.
don't really fit into sometimes the material practice of this ethic, but I
Hmm.
absolutely feel a connection to the spiritual aspect of punk, because punk is all about becoming your own authority. When
Hmm.
I was like in my 20s, I was really obsessed with this band called The Clash.
Hmm.
And they're a punk band from the UK. Like, they had their heyday like the 70s, right? But I was like obsessed with them in like the mid 2000s. And their lead singer, Joe Strummer, he said, like, being probably like more of a paraphrase, but he's like, being a punk is like basically being a human with exemplary manners and
Hmm.
respecting your other human beings, right? People think it's typically like, oh, about destroying things, or
Yeah.
about being F you, and
Hmm.
that's a part of it, but that gets old after a while.
Yeah.
So, but for me, it's more like punk is about like creating something from nothing. It's about
Hmm.
working with what you have. It's about saying no to the rules. I was really big at one point to zine culture. And basically all you need is a piece of paper, maybe a copy machine, and your writing utensils. And you can literally become your own publishing house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, yes, there's going to be some limitations with distribution, but
Mm-hmm.
people built entire followings and were able to really speak their opinions that maybe they wouldn't be able to do in like a
Mm-hmm.
mainstream magazine. So for me, it's like there are, in every society, we have a status quo. We have laws and governments. And for many of us, these things do not reflect us and our true freedom. So we have
Mm-hmm.
to oftentimes do our own work to find that freedom. And for me, being like a punk spiritualist is like, well, I'm creating my own, right? Because some of
Yeah.
these things I go to, they don't fit me. They don't feel like
Right.
they honor my full being as a
Yes.
woman, as like someone who is fluid, as someone who loves her body and sex,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm like, this
Mm-hmm.
is not fitting. And as opposed to getting angry at you, I'm like, but
Mm-hmm.
I do like that part that you do. So I'm gonna
Take
take that
that.
part, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like to take what works for you and leave the rest.
Yeah.
I don't say that like, oh, I'm an official practitioner of XYZ,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not, like, but I can say, oh, but this thing about your practice, I really love, right? So I feel like for me and my spiritual movement, there are things in the Christian tradition I really appreciate. There
Mm-hmm.
are many things in the yoga tradition I deeply appreciate and I respect. There are things in the Ifa tradition that I truly appreciate and respect. And I'm not really creating my own like religion, but I'm
Yeah.
creating my own spiritual compass that actually
Yes.
respects the fullness of who I am. And so that's kind of what I mean by being like punk, because like I can do it. I'm a human. I'm here. I can do whatever I want, So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where I go with that.
I love that. I feel like as I am deconstructing my faith and I'm really investigating what makes sense for me
Mm-hmm.
and what feels good for me and mostly what makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I find myself I think in a lot of ways like that really aligns. It makes sense for me, resonates because I look at the world. One thing that I always struggled with as a kid is what do you mean there's just one way to do this? If there are, look at us, we are so diverse. Like every single person on this planet is different. We speak different languages, we live in different climates, we look different, like all the things. There can't be just one way. And if we're all especially reflections of this divine, it's not just one way to do things. So
Mm-hmm.
at now in my adulthood, and as I'm like spending more time critically thinking, I'm picking up like what feels good, what makes sense from all the spiritual practices and applying it to my life. So I
Mm-hmm,
love
mm-hmm.
that.
That's
Maybe I'm
beautiful.
a punk spiritualist too.
Yeah, you are. Welcome to the club.
Thank you. Thank you. So, talk to me about pleasure. The way we think about pleasure, especially as Black women, regardless of our origin, right? I think it's really repressive, unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
for most places. What was your childhood like in terms of what were you taught about you deserving not even sexual pleasure, but just happiness, just pleasure in general? Did you get any
Yeah,
messaging?
yeah, I got a lot of messaging that I'm still unlearning. And then yeah, most of it was not the greatest.
Hmm.
Because I think that unfortunately these stories about the fear of pleasure, I almost feel like it's
Yep.
like pleasure phobic cultures, they're passed down. So I'm Nigerian American, was born in England and came to
Hmm.
the US when I was like 4 years old. And for the first 4 years of my life, I was in this kind of interesting foster care situation where I had like a white nanny,
Hmm.
and then came and basically met my parents like at 4 years old.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was like quite the culture shock. Part of me is like,
Mhm.
who are these Black people? Like, why am I, here? But I was very much introduced very early on, like, oh, they're not playing. Like, this is like, all of a sudden it's like I'm an oldest sister.
Mm,
And my parents at that point they co-owned like a convenience store of my uncle. Then my dad
mhm.
had his own store, but it was like work, right?
Yeah.
Like work, because that was the evidence of like you're moving forward in the world, right? Put in work hard.
Yes.
So my dad, especially when I started playing basketball, it was a lot of like, it definitely was like, oh, we're just playing for fun. Like, no, it's like, you're going to get a scholarship, you know?
It was work from the jump.
Yeah, like everything
Yeah.
was work. I remember he used to do this thing that used to drive me like crazy. I still talk about it with my sister now where, and as an immigrant, I was the oldest daughter, like almost never got to go out. But like I could kind of convince him to let me go to school dances once in a while. I remember like like he would drop me off and then he'd be like, but like he'd always had this little zing, like, but you could be at home, like studying, So then I would be at the dance. I couldn't really enjoy it because I'd be thinking like, maybe I should be at home.
Right.
Like, why am I shouldn't be here. And that voice, even though like, he's definitely, my dad is like mellowed in age, but that like refrain of
Sure.
you have to work and work is the most important thing. And then from that, his setting, I went to military school.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So it's like military school for 5 years, military college. And I was in the US Coast Guard for 6 years. So yeah, these are spaces where pleasure is not exactly centric,
Right. Nope.
It's seen as like frivolous or something to let off steam.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, in a lot of our societies, it's very few spaces you can find where pleasure is kind of treated as a discipline, where pleasure is treated as like an exploration of our highest self, right? So yeah, unfortunately, I did learn a lot about like, oh, that's not important.
Mm-hmm.
What's important is like, your grades, and then it's
Yeah.
your money, and then it's your accolades, and then it's these things. So, but I always felt like something about this doesn't feel right to me, doesn't feel right to my spirit. So I felt like I started to kind of explore outside of that paradigm in my early 20s. But that conditioning is really deep, and I still find myself sometimes having to be like, okay, you're doing it again.
Yep.
And also having patience with myself as I'm unlearning this, even as someone who speaks very openly about the power of pleasure.
I mean, those formative years are just that, like what we've heard a lot, what was instilled in us during that time frame really becomes, to your point, it becomes like what we hear, that inner voice, or a large part of that inner voice. So give yourself grace if you still, are still in process and transit of overcoming that. So talk to me about your 20s. What allowed you to start to think, well, this don't make no sense.
Yeah. I think I was like sad, right? Yeah. So I was like, well, I don't know if I should be sad like this all the time, right? And yeah, so I think I just was like, I'm naturally a seeker. If something is not around me, I'm always thinking there's got to be like, I'm very much like alternative. I'm like, if I don't like this, there's got to be an alternative. There's got to be someone who's saying the opposite of this somewhere in the world. I started in my early 20s. I worked with a holistic health counselor about like body image and eating, intuitive eating, and health at every size. And she had this like reading list of books that she had informed her own journey. And she gave me this book called, I think it's like The School of Womanly Arts by Regina Thomas Howard. And I was like, oh, sounds interesting, And so I read it. And that really was a big opening for me because it was like, oh, like, first off, really seeing it as like a collective issue. It's not just like a personal problem.
Yeah.
And seeing that many women have this. It was written by a white woman. But I still believe that there's still so many ways that women as a whole, we've been schooled to basically be sacrificial. And like, to me, sometimes the older I get and the more layers I see, the more I'm like, oh, this is like really bad, because I think that women need to be like dancing naked under the full moon,
Right.
I think that like we were made for pleasure. Like our bodies were made for pleasure, literally. Like we have an organ on our body that has no use except for pleasure. That's it.
Right.
That's all it's made for. And then I'm like, well, why would the creator give me this thing?
Right.
And then also consign me to a world of misery? That doesn't make any sense to me. So that book really opened up a portal for me. And I ended up going to like her experience like many years later, like almost a decade after I read her book. But those two experiences, and just like many experiences throughout the way, where I could see like that it was when I followed my pleasure that things actually opened up for me. And also seeing the ways that it was scary to sometimes be in that space. and having to also again see it as like a tool that you refine, because
Yeah.
pleasure really, it's very personal, it's very layered, and it really requires you to know yourself and to trust yourself and to also like follow through on
Mm-hmm.
what you said you want to do, right? Because it's like, okay, you said you like that, but you're doing this. What's going on here, right? This is a
Right.
discrepancy. So for me, that was like a big like opening for me in my
Mm-hmm.
20s.
So in what ways, you said that, pleasure helps like the world open up to you. So in what ways?
I guess for me, it gives me a sense of honesty. If I'm opening up to pleasure and I'm now like actually pursuing it, like maybe I'm going to the dance class, I'm curating my schedule so that I have rest in between, it opens up my literal body to more
Mm,
pleasure and to more awareness, right? Because now the negative, uh, sometimes like not so much like negative, but things that aren't so pleasurable are going to be more knowing in me.
mm-hmm.
It has kind of, I feel like it takes me to like a new vista of like thinking and feeling, because it's very easy to get caught up in like the victimhood of being a woman, of being a Black woman. But pleasure takes me to this new place of, well, who am I at my highest potential? Who
Mm,
am I when I'm like, that is here, the knife, the wound, that is there. But who am I when that's not there? How do I now
yeah.
have to move and act and like practice? So it opened me up to self expression. It opened me up like sexually, to exploring what I was actually attracted to and not.
Mm-hmm.
It opened my like world as into like cannabis, and like cannabis's relationship with pleasure. So I feel like it's just brought me into new communities, new relationships. It sometimes has meant that I've had to leave certain things behind, and certain relationships have not felt as aligned. So that's sometimes been hurtful. But even that has been part of the path of,
Yeah.
again, a really divine honesty. And to me, a deep connection to my ancestors, because I just know, like, when I can just, even my immediate ancestors, I'm like, we've gone through too much pain. This is too
Yeah.
much. And
Yeah.
I just think, like, for me, I don't have children, but I just would want the next generation to know and to practice that you don't have to like repeat this. This is
Yeah.
not that loyalty can be somewhere else. In fact, I don't think our ancestors want our loyalty to their pain. I think they want us to be extremely loyal to our pleasure. I think that's actually how
Mm.
we evolve. I think we have to acknowledge the pain, but I think the practice of evolving is moving into our pleasure, because they didn't even have the opportunity to. Sometimes they didn't even have the opportunity to dream of it. So here we are, and it's not to put pressure, because we also have limitations and obligations. But when we can, how
Mm-hmm.
can I make this thing just a little bit more pleasurable for me? Because that little bit, a little bit of honey goes a long way.
I love that so much. It's empowering, because there are certain things that we can't help, right? You're born woman, you're born Black, you're born in certain places of the world, and those are things that you have no choice in. But how you move about your day, we do have some choice, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And taking
mm-hmm,
ownership of that, it makes perfect sense what you just said. I love that.
mm-hmm,
And then even thinking about our ancestors, I was actually last night I was like writing about what if it all works out? Because right now, and just in general, if I'm honest, I'm a little bit pessimistic, right? And I'm
mm-hmm,
always like, I look for the negative, and I'm trying to train my brain to look towards like, yes, this
mm-hmm,
sucks, but this right here doesn't suck, right?
mm-hmm,
And to lean into what doesn't suck, and thinking about how our ancestors went through a lot, and if we just take being resilient from them and nothing else, we'll be
mm-hmm.
excellent survivors, but we're not going to thrive. And to your point, we're not
No.
going to move to that next level. So I really appreciate that. That like all the things came together for me just a second ago now.
Oh,
So thank
awesome. Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about how wellness in general, what I'm seeing is that it becomes a never ending treadmill to self improve. And that can
Mm-hmm.
sometimes become a jail in and of itself. Like it doesn't feel good. So, what are your thoughts there and how can we move past that? I think you kind of told us.
Yeah, I think that there needs to actually be more study about self-help addiction, and not in like a, like a pop psychology kind of way, but a deeper way in which that addiction is a very multi-layered, somatic, spiritual, emotional, like
Mm-hmm.
learning experience. There's like a energy that's
Mm-hmm.
there. And that sometimes what happens is you translate the energy of like maybe self-destruction in one place to another place, but it can seem like on the face of it that you're doing all the right things, but the energy of fixing, the energy of hiding, the energy of doing overwhelm is still there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I still move with,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm way better than I used to be. I mean, I was like, when I was going to church, I was that I was that person who would always be coming up at the altar call, like,
Mm-hmm.
when they'd be like, "Are you sure? Are you serving, Jesus or God to the best of your ability?" I'm like, "I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I need to do better,
Let
right?"
me go ahead. Right.
So I
Yeah.
would go up. Of course, no one
Yep.
else is really doing this. So, but I think like that kind of like fixing and being perfect. I'm also an eldest
Mm-hmm.
daughter in a
Yep.
Nigerian like immigrant household. So like that is very deeply there. So I
Yep.
was bringing a lot of that energy to self help. But I think it's like honestly like taking the pause and being like, is this actually helping me? Do I
Mm-hmm.
feel happier? Is this another self-protection kind of thing to save me from the vulnerability of feeling,
Yeah. Ooh.
of just being like, how do I feel? And sometimes, like we as Black women, we come from communities which it's really difficult sometimes, the environment that we're around. And so we have a habit of moving into like there's like spiritual and political bypassing. We're bypassing the deeper emotional wounds and psychological aches with a lot of activity. And that because that activity is tied to a really moral good, it's very easy to think that like you're actually getting to the healing.
Yeah.
But the healing is probably going to look like, especially for many Black women, it's going to look more like relaxing. It's going to look more like doing nothing. It's going to be look more like being like, I am good as I am, and that this whole world is the one that's having a crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could see though there's been a change. As much as I'm still very invested in being a lifelong grower and learner, but the energy behind it has changed significantly. And I even like my bookshelf reflects it because before I used to be like all self-help books, like just,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I had all these courses I was in. And then I'm like, how can I even take any of this in? If, it's like, I'm like, I'm just overwhelming myself yet again.
Yeah. Yep.
So for me, it's more like, sometimes it's a fluid movement of really being able to come home to the self.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to kind of look around at a lot of us and also at myself. And I'm like, this is not it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, this isn't it either. But I think it's really easy to get lost in it. And in the beginning of your journey, it makes sense, right? You have the energy, you're
Mm-hmm.
excited. But I do think that there needs to be a sustainability to what you're doing, right? Like, and also really listening to your wounds, right? What has broken my heart might not be the same thing that's broken your heart,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
self-help will give you this like, and this is what you do, right? Which is already a problem because we're
Mm-hmm.
not robots. We are humans.
Exactly.
We are
Yep.
layered. So I think it's about really listening to you and your body, your mind, your soul, your ancestry, because they speak to you, your ancestors with the patterns you keep coming into, where you keep being drawn to. So, and if you're doing all these things, you're not in tune with that,
Yep.
right? You're yet again kind of protecting yourself of overwhelm. But that's also, I think, something to have compassion for is like, we do that for a reason. It's self
Yeah.
protective, right? It's not
Yeah.
because we're stupid or because we want to feel busy and stressed. It's literally like the system is like, this is what I did to feel safe. So I'm going to
Yes.
keep doing it and wherever I go. So it's being able to be like, okay, there needs to be another way to help you feel safe so that we can feel safe enough to feel what we actually feel.
Ooh, that is the way you're talking to me specifically right now, like and about me. I realize that for a while, my bookshelf, same, nothing but self-help books. And for me, I thought I was being still by physically sitting to read something, but no, I'm still in motion. And what I
Mm-hmm.
realized about myself is that once I get still for real, I'm uncomfortable. That stillness makes me, okay, now I can feel. I don't like to feel,
Mm-hmm.
So let me get to my book. And then they told me to do this thing. This is my regimen, my prescription for what is going to fix me. So I'm going to keep doing that. And then to a point, it gets exhausting. Like I cannot be a lifelong project to fix, right?
Mm-mm.
And the stillness, like being able to be still and feel is like, okay, this is me.
Mm-hmm.
And even in my imperfection, I'm okay,
Yes.
So yeah, oh my goodness. If there was one thing that you would want folks to take away from your book, what would that one thing be? And I know that's a loaded question.
Well, thank you for asking, because it's like the little first page where I was like, if someone picked up this book and literally all they read is like the first like paragraph, or
Mm-hmm.
first, that I want them to walk away with like, that is the thesis. And the thesis is like, you were made to follow your bliss. Like you were made to alchemize your pain into your peace, into your power and your pleasure. Everything you've gone through, everything your ancestors have gone through, everything that your community has gone through is a pathway towards your bliss. And bliss, how I define it, is peace, power, and pleasure. And what my peace looks like and what your peace looks like will change, will be different. Sometimes they will align and be very much, connected. That's why you are here. We are told so many reasons, like you're here to serve, you're here to work, you're here to lead. And like, sure, yeah, okay, cool. But you're also here to alchemize everything you've gone through into your own version of bliss.
Mm-hmm.
And so your life is literally like an experiment to do that.
Oh, so beautiful. So where can the people find you online?
So best place for me is, let's see, the most static place is my website, which is hannahoeko.com. I love to play around with Instagram. So I'm at hannah.eko. And I write at hannaheekowrites.substack.com.
Okay, beautiful. So I will link all of those down below in the show notes. So go ahead and follow along. Go ahead and also purchase the book. Thank you. This was such a good conversation. And I needed to hear all of this today. So thank you. Really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Be Well Sis. If you'd like to get in touch with us, there's a link in the show notes. Be Well Sis is hosted by me, Dr. Cassandra Dunbar, and produced by Edit Audio. Don't forget to hit follow so you never miss an episode. Until next time, be well, sis.